Hi everyone. So this is our first distance learning lesson. I'm going to do a little bit of review of stuff that we had learned before the March break. So there's a warm up right here on anything from lessons 2.1 to 2.3, and we had been learning about solving equations. Now, I'm also going to get into a little bit later in this video lesson 2.4, which is new stuff that I was going to tackle after the March break. Okay, now just as a warning, I don't have writing technology at home, so I'm just working with what I have, and I will be writing with my mouse, so you'll notice that it actually is going to get very messy. Okay, so I'm doing the best that I can, and I guess in these kinds of situations, that's all we can really do. Okay, so let's get started. I've already pre-written the solutions. I've typed them out, and I'm going to use my mouse to just write on top of them to explain my solutions. Okay, so throughout solving these types of questions, which were the ones that we saw before the March break from 2.1 to 2.3, we always performed opposite operations in order to isolate the variable. So we wanted the letter by itself. And while all of that is going on, we're keeping in mind that the equations have to be balanced, which means that in the middle there's an equal sign and anything on the left side has to be balanced with the right side. So I'm going to go through these three examples just as a refresher. Let's start with this one. 8x plus 5 equals to -3. So our job is to get x by itself eventually so that we can get the answer for what x represents. Okay, now what we have to do is take a look at what's attached to that x. So this 8 is attached to the x, and so is the 5. Now we're going to slowly move those numbers to the other side of the equal sign, but we always start with the one that's actually farther away from the x. So do you see how like this 8 is very close to the x, and then this 5 is a little bit farther away. So let's move that 5 over first. I'm going to move it over here, and I always put it at the back of the number that's already on the right side. So notice that the -3 didn't move sides, and that's why I wrote it again right here. All right, but if we move the 5 to the other side, we have to do the opposite operation, which means that it's not a +5 anymore, it's a -5. All right, so that 8x also didn't move from the left-hand side of the equation, and that's why it's still there. So that's how we actually write the next step in our solving of this equation. Okay, let's keep going. Because you now have two numbers over here that you can put together, let's do that. -3 minus 5 is going to be -8. Okay, now this 8x we're going to write again because we didn't do anything with it, so it's just going to stay there for now. Now that we have simplified the above equation, we can start to move the number that's attached to the x over to the other side, because again, we want to isolate our variable. So it's almost by itself, but it's stuck to this 8, and that 8 is multiplying that x. So let's get rid of the 8 by doing the opposite operation, and the opposite of a multiply is going to be a divide. So bear with me as I try to write with my mouse neatly. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to divide by 8 because it's the opposite of that multiply. Now, whatever we do to one side, we're going to have to do to the other side of the equation. So just remember to divide this guy by 8 as well. Okay, and 8 divided by 8 is going to give me a 1. So there is a 1 right in front here. It is a 1x, but we already know that there is a 1 in front of there because you wrote an x. I mean, that means there's 1x, right? So we don't want to repeat ourselves, so don't write the 1. We know that there's 1 there. All right, so 1x, right over here, is equal to -8 divided by 8 is -1. So that's going to be our final answer for this question. Now, the second question is a little bit different, and that's where now you have letters, your variables, but they're on both sides of the equation. So let me just highlight that. I like to kind of just show that this W and this W are going to want to be together, okay, on the same side. Now, this one doesn't have a W, so that's a different term, and that's going to be separate. We can leave that on the right side. So let me get my pen back out. You want both the yellows to be on the same side, so move that 5W to be with that 2W. Now, whether you put it in the front or in the back, it really doesn't matter. I usually like to put it behind this guy, even though I wrote the arrow that way. Okay, so since the negative 2w didn't move sides, it's going to stay the same. So there it is right there. Oh, that's the wrong color. Let's use our yellow. There we go. Okay, now the 5w, since it was a negative before and you moved it to the other side, it's going to become a positive 5. So you change the operation to the opposite symbol. Now the negative 9 didn't move, and so you're not going to change it. It's still going to be a negative 9, and it's going to stay on the right-hand side. So now you have both of your like terms. Do you remember that word, like terms? Okay, so like terms are similar terms. You have both of your w's on one side, and then you have your green on your other side. All right, so you can put those two w's together. Negative 2 plus 5 is going to give you a 3w. And you still have that negative 9 on this side. So that's perfect. You've simplified it. Looks very simple right now. And we're going to do that last step again, which is your w is almost isolated by itself. But what you want to do is you want to get rid of that 3. So let's divide that 3 out. Okay, and do the same to the other side. 3 divided by 3 is going to be 1w, and negative 9 divided by 3 is going to be negative 3. Okay, so let's go on to the last one. This is where we're just making it look a little bit more complicated. So here I have my w's, right? And then I have my numbers that have no w's. So you want both of the greens on one side and both of the yellows on the other side. So what you're going to do, I should get my pen out, is make sure you move that yellow over to this side to be with the other yellow. But then at the same time, you want to make sure that you move that green to the other. Oh my goodness. I probably should have invested in some sort of an iPad at some point. Okay, so you want to make sure that the green is going to be with the other green. All right, so when you move that 8 to the other side, it changes to a negative 8. When you move the negative 5 over to the other side, you're going to get a positive 5. All right, let me get my highlighter. Okay, so you're going to have both of your yellows on one side and both of your greens on the other side, which is perfect. Now you have your green answer. Negative 7 minus 8 is negative 15. And then you also have negative 2w plus 5w gives you the 3w. So everything is nice and simplified. And again, usually our last step is going to be that division. So we want to divide that 3 out so that this becomes a 1. And you get your 1w all by itself. Just don't forget to do what you did on the other side as well. Okay, so our final answer is going to be negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. All right, so that is a really quick review of what we learned before the March break. And now what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to solve equations, but I'm going to add some brackets. Now our learning goals are going to be at the end of this lesson. I'd like you to check off these learning goals and just make sure that you feel pretty comfortable with recognizing, expanding, or simplifying equations, adding or subtracting both sides to isolate the variable, adding or subtracting both sides to solve for the variable, or if you need to do some multiplication or division, we're also going to do that to solve for the variable, and we can check using our mental calculation, so we can check our answers. All right? Okay. So notice that these questions have brackets in them now. So how do we do that? Well, it's actually one more step than we're used to. Everything else is pretty much the same, but the first thing you're going to do is you're going to do the distributive property. So since 4 is multiplying everything inside this bracket, you're actually going to take the 4, multiply the x first. So there we go, 4x. And then you're going to take the 4 and multiply the negative 1. So you're going to get negative 4. Keep the 8, okay, on the outside. And now this just becomes a question that we had done at the very beginning. See, it looks just like this type of question right here. Okay, so that's the only extra trick to having brackets when you're solving equations. You're just going to do the distributive property first. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move the negative 4 to the other side. All right, because we want that x to be by itself, and that 4 is really, really close to it. So we want to leave that alone for now. Move that -4 to the other side, it's going to become a +4. Keep the 8. And now the only thing left on the left-hand side is the 4x. You can put the 8 and the 4 together, and that makes it 12. Okay, and just rewrite the 4x. Now, do you remember what the next step is? Now that everything is very simplified, you want to get rid of that 4, and how do we do that again? That 4 is multiplying, so we're going to do a division. So the opposite operation is divide by 4, and we're going to do the same to the other side. Okay, so 4 divided by 4 is going to get a 1x. 12 divided by 4 is going to give you 3. Now you can always check your answer, and this is how we're going to do this. So just check your answer of 3, okay, by taking the x right here, and what you want to do is just scratch it out, put a 3 instead, and then follow it and see if you get 8. So in the brackets, because we always do BEDMAS brackets first, 3 minus 1, which is 2, and then multiply that by 4. 2 times 4 is going to be 8. So then we know that this answer is going to be correct. So that's how we do our little mental check. At the very end, you can always check your answers just to make sure that you got the right answer. All right, so I'd like you to go through the next one by yourself and see if you can do that on your own. Just remember that the very first step is going to be you want to take the 3 and distribute it through. Okay, so that's going to give you 3a plus 6, and then you keep the -6 by itself. So I'm going to see if you guys can go through these steps by yourself, but I'm going to go through ones that have a couple more brackets now. Okay, so whenever you see the brackets with the number in front, you're going to distribute it out. So 5x plus 5 times 6 is going to be 30. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another color and I'm going to do the distributive law. There are 3x, and then 3 times -1 is going to be -3. Okay? Now what you'll notice is that this actually looks a little bit more complicated, looks very similar to this warm-up question right here. Okay? So it's going to be just a couple more steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my highlighter out. Here's an x and this one's an x. So you want both of your x's on the on the same side. And here is a number that has no x's, and then this one also has no x's. So you want those on the same side as well. Now just remember that when you decide to move things over, so let's say you're going to move this 30 to be with the other green, it's got to change from a +30 to a -30. Now that green right there, that -3, is still going to be the same because you didn't change the side. Okay, it's still on the right hand side, but now that -30 is also on the right hand side. All right, so you want this yellow to be with the other yellow. It's a +3. When you bring it over, it's going to become a -3. So now both of your yellows are on the same side too, and we're going to put them together. Okay, so you have both your yellows on this side. 5 minus 3 is going to give you 2. And then -3 minus 30 is going to give you -33. Okay. The last step is this 2 is multiplying the x. Let's get rid of it by doing the opposite, which is a division. You're going to do the same to the other side. And you get 2 divided by 2 is 1. -33 divided by 2 is -16.5. It's okay to have these decimal answers. That's not a big deal. It's fine. You can have fraction answers or decimal answers, but obviously we really like these nice clean answers. So again, I'd like you to try this one on your own. You're going to multiply this in, right? And you're going to get these two equals, and then make sure that you multiply also the 4 in as well, and do the distributive property. Okay, so try this one out. The answer is 10.5. So this is going to be just a longer lesson because we did that review of the lessons that we did before the March break. We also have another lesson coming up, and we'll try to do maybe about 3 hours of lesson and homework each week. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day.